inviting me over. I'm coming from Madrid. I'm Nico. I'm the data strategy director for Prisa Media. I guess that most of you don't know Prisa. Prisa is one of the biggest publishing groups in Spanish-speaking content, and we will talk to you about a little bit more of what we do and what we produce. And thanks for inviting me over again.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, Nico, all the way from Madrid. Let's have a look at Prisa's business goals. What can you say about your vision, strategy, and so on?
Yes. So as I was mentioning, Prisa is one of the biggest publishing groups in terms of press and radio. That is where we are coming from. So we have a long tradition with big brands present in Spain and Latam. What we are doing as part of our business is transforming ourselves from those traditional ways of printing press and having radio and FM to the digital world. So you can see some of our numbers over there. So in terms of our portfolio of brands, we have more than 30 brands under the umbrella of Prisa Media. And you can see that the monthly devices and the monthly unique visitors that we are impacting is quite big. Those 230 million that you can see on the slide, those are monthly unique visitors. So you can guess that our reach is quite big. And in terms of our business model, I think that as part of our digital transformation, we are moving into paid subscriptions. So similarly to the case study that maybe is more familiar to you with the New York Times, we're following kind of the same path, and we are trying to move the traditional subscriptions of printed paper into digital subscriptions, and we have just reached more than 250K paid subscribers, which might not seem like a big number, but if you look into the Spanish market, that is a huge number, and we are the top ones in the Spanish market.
Yeah, it's good to hear. I see you speak a lot about Prisa ID as part of your strategy. Mm-hmm. Can you say a bit more about what Prisa ID means?
Okay, so if you think about what we are doing in digital, as I was mentioning, we come from a legacy of doing printed press and broadcasting radio in FM. So what we are doing is moving into digital. And as part of that, what we want to do is ensure that we are using data in a clever fashion. So what we are building is the Prisa ID. And the Prisa ID, it might seem like we are building a unique user ID, but it's much more than that. For us, the Prisa ID is our data strategy framework. And what we are including under that umbrella are those 4 pillars that you can see in the slide. So we have the unified data, and this is something that we have been doing for many years. So what we are doing basically is grouping all the data that we are gathering from our users. So that means information coming from our websites or from our mobile devices, as well as other data sources like our registration system. And we're putting all of that together in our data lake. So that's what we are including in the unified profile. But what we want to do under this Prisa ID is to make sure that we can use that data to recognize people. That's the identity graph part, and I'm sure that we will deep dive into that aspect during the tech talk. We are also making sure that we are impacting our business with the data that we are creating. So for that, we have the activation and personalization. So what we want to enable, and that's kind of the role of Adobe Experience Platform within the mix, is making sure that that unified data and the unified profile view can be used for activating and personalizing on our assets. And the other part is that as part of transitioning from our traditional way of creating content into the digital world, we need to be innovative and create new ways of presenting the content and reaching the audience. So that's why using this data to power upsell and cross-sell initiative and also to test new formats is really important. And this is what the Prisa ID needs to enable. It's a framework with a lot of capabilities that we are putting at the hands of the strategy of our content producer and our business so they can be more clever with the data.
Yeah, it's great to hear that it's much more than just an identity.
Yes.
It's also good to hear that as part of your legacy, you had already lots of data, that data was sitting in a data lake already, but still something was missing to really take action upon that data. It's great that Adobe is able to help you with that, but obviously it's much more than just the Adobe ecosystem. How do you use that Prisa ID in the communication between what happens in the Adobe ecosystem and the outside world?
Yes. So I think that if I explain a little bit more about what we include under the tech for the Prisa ID, we have Google Cloud Platform, which is where we have our data lake and where we build our propensity models. What we are doing right now is introducing real-time CDP from Adobe Experience Platform. So that is what is helping us produce activation in terms of that data. So we are taking that unified data model and putting that in the CDP. If we think about the IDs themselves, one of our main data sources for this is our registration platform. And this is, I think, one of the big misses when thinking about CDP projects. So if you think about identities, for us, what we are doing is basically creating a single sign-on across all of our brands. So some of the brands that you can see over there are El País, As, Los 40. So all of those brands use the same email and the same password or the same social login for the users. So that system is connected with Adobe Experience Platform, and that enables us to recognize consistently across our devices and our brands the same user. And what we are doing to make sure that it's not only impacting our business and the experiences that we are building, is trying to connect ourselves with the outside world. So I'm sure that most of you know initiatives from Google with the PPID or the new pair initiative, where they are trying to make sure that we have an alternative to third-party cookies. So what we are doing is connecting our knowledge of the users that we have in real-time CDP, so in AEP, with the outside world through this type of ID networks. Yep. Google is one of those, but we are also working with other players like LiveRamp or COTAP.
Yep. So I think everybody is aware of the cookieless evolution, the third-party cookies going away, and so on. So how can Prisa ID still give support for today's support for third-party cookies in Google Chrome as an example, but also prepare for the future? How do you see that evolve? And what kind of reach do you have on that inventory?
It's a really good question, because when we were thinking about what technology we should put within the Prisa ID, we were evaluating if what we had was enough for not the current situation, but also for the future. So we used to have a DMP, and what we are doing right now is transitioning from that DMP into RT-CDP. But if we think about our main ad servers that we use to serve data and to connect with the outside world, just with the CDP was not enough. So what we are doing is having a mix of Adobe Audience Manager as a DMP and RT-CDP. So we are putting the focus on building the data model, the correct data model in our CDP, and we're just using the DMP for segment sharing externally. In terms of cookie match, we have around 60–70% cookie match with our ad server and with our main SSPs. What we are seeing now is that we still have a long way to go for the cookieless world. So as part of our strategy, what we are doing is increasing or pushing that our users go and register themselves and navigate in our assets as login users. So in terms of numbers, for example, in El País, which is one of our biggest brands, 1 out of 4 page views comes from a logged user. So for us, that's a big success, because that will give us a lot of reach in a cookieless world.
Yeah. And I think a topic that's related to that is the consent topic. So more and more consent is top of mind for everybody in this room, but also, I guess, for you. Consent drives what you can or cannot do with the data of your customers. How is that happening at Prisa currently? How deep do you collect that consent? And what kind of enforcement do you apply?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So if we think about how we're handling this in Prisa, we have 2 types of consent. So the first thing is that if you go into one of our brands and come in as an anonymous user, you will see a cookie banner. So within the cookie banner, that is where we are going to be collecting kind of the AIB standard consents, and that will be passed into your anonymous profile. And what we are doing is everything that is anonymous-based or is dependent on a cookie, we are using that consent to decide what we can do with that data. And we have another layer of consent that kicks in once you become a registered user. So we have a specific consent panel for those users. That consent panel, as we are a media group, is divided like into groups. We have consent for things that we can do as Prisa Media across all of the brands, and we have a specific consent for brand level information. So I think that for us, this framework gives us a lot of flexibility, and we are quite transparent with what we do with the data with our users. But one of the challenges is managing this level of consents, because if you have to take into account in every single segment that you build, the consent associated with this is tricky and difficult. So that's why AEP and the new consent enforcement framework that is available for us is really powerful, and it brings us a lot of potential to reduce the operational hassle. That means taking into account every single consent for managing segments.
Cool, makes sense. The whole ad server ecosystem is mainly focused on display advertising, search advertising, and so on. But obviously, your advertisers also want to target customers through other channels. What kind of approach are you proposing to them to safely share data between Prisa and their own environments?
Yes. And that's part of our data strategy as well. So basically, if you think about how we make money as a business, we have like two main lines. The first one is that paid subscription model that I was mentioning, and the other one is monetizing our ad spaces and our data. So what we have been doing so far is kind of a traditional advertising. We have used the DMP to power the campaigns with the segmentation that we own. But in terms of increasing and giving new possibilities to our advertisers, we're trying to build one-to-one relationships. And for this, we are exploring things like having a data clean room to have more open and flexible conversations with our data, and to enable the measurement of the attribution and the performance of the campaigns. But something that we are already exploring is using one of the functionalities of AEP, which is called segment match. And basically, this allows us to build those one-to-one relationships with advertisers, where we are able to see the overlap between our segments using the identifiers that we will select in a privacy-first fashion. So in Spain, there is already a footprint of AEP clients, and we are already exploring these options with them.
Yeah. So to be clear, a customer like Real Madrid in Spain
That's a good example.
Is able to share data, share segments with you in a safe and secure way, and basically reach people based on data coming from Prisa.
Yeah, that's one of the use cases that we would love to deploy. So if you look into our brands, we have brands that produce a specific content for sports. So for Real Madrid, what we could end up doing is building an audience of Real Madrid fans and use this segment match functionality to have that one-to-one relationship with them.
Yep.
And at the end, this data inside that CDP, if you think of what the impact that this could have for the Real Madrid, they could use this segment not only for media, but also for other channels as well. So I think that it's a new space, and I think that it brings a lot of potential for both publishers and advertisers.
Yeah. So I think in short, a common data foundation, a brain for communication and orchestration is what you now have. Consent, event data, behavioral data, profile data is stored in that profile foundation, and then the consent is enforced automatically so that you can share data in a safe and secure way with any of your partners.
Yes, and without the burden of having to configure all of this manually, which for me is quite critical, because when you have the scale that we have, trying to make sure that everyone is doing their job, it's a little bit challenging, and even technically, sometimes it's difficult to know if you are segmenting in a correct way. So having a consent framework for me is critical.
Yep. Good. Maybe a last thing for the people in the room, if you could give an advice to people working at a publisher, what would the top 3 things be?
That's a tough question as well. So if you think about what is coming for us, I think that if you have been using a DMP, you need to prepare yourself with something to replace that in the midterm, because the third-party cookies are disappearing. The second part is that data strategy is not only about getting emails or getting more users. You need to think about how you're going to power the experience thanks to the data that you are collecting. So data strategy should cover that place. So that should go hand by hand, how you monetize the data and how you produce the experience at the back of it. The third one will be to be patient. So these things that I'm talking about, they will take time, and it's not only from an implementation perspective. When I was giving the reference of the percentage of login traffic that we have in El País, that takes quite a lot of months and years to build, and we are still in a long journey to deliver upon that vision. So patient, I think that is a key one.
Yeah. Good. Right. Thanks a lot, Nico. Thank you for coming all the way here.
Thanks for inviting me.
We'll be back in a couple of minutes for the next presentation. Thanks.
See you guys. Bye-bye.